Namaste, I am Rajesh Kamath. I am a practitioner, teacher and student of Bharatiya Shastra and more specifically Kautilya Arthashastra applied to daily life. And this is a series which is about Kautilyan psychology applied to your professional lives and crafting a strategy around it. Happy to be back with our fifth installment of Kautilyan Psychology and its application in strategy. You know, friends, you all have been watching this now for a while. Here is where we go deep into the Chanakyan thought process, where he helps us come up with various solutions to common problems in our personal and professional life. But it doesn't all happen in one shot. So you have to watch, listen, and work on yourself, because we provide you with certain exercises that have to be used, and the experience of it will help you move ahead. So what are we speaking about? So far, we've arrived at the fact that Acharyas told us that if you want to build relationships or you want to solve problems in your personal life or your professional life, you have to study the patterns of those people. But don't you forget, first we have to identify our own pattern. What patterns am I speaking about? We said that there are 4 kinds of patterns or 4 kinds of personalities that emerge based on the predominant behaviors. And Acharya gave us a sutra which we will mention again. Acharya tells us Kruddha, Lubdha, VIth, Maninastu, Paresham Krutyaha. And essentially 4 types emerge over here, which he says you must study amongst other people. So Kruddha are those who are driven by emotion, Lubdha are those who are driven by what's in it for me, VIth are those who are driven by fear or pressure, Manina are those who are driven by attention. Now, last time we said that if you have identified your own type and those amongst others, then you can deal with those types better. Wherever you want to look for examples, the best place to go to is always our Itihaas. Yes, Itihaas, not mythology. And by Itihaas, I am talking about our 2 great epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Let's just take 2 instances from each, which talk about psychological types and the aftermath. Okay, let me take those examples. If you look at the example of Manthara, I'm sure that's one character that everybody remembers, right? The humpbacked Manthara had completely hijacked the mind of Rani Kaikeyi. You remember that? The how of it will come to. That's example number 1. Do you also remember how Shurpanaka was able to completely influence the mind of Ravana? When she came into the court of that great Ravana and was able to instigate him sufficiently about Sri Ram, Lakshman, and most importantly, about the beauty of Ma Sita. Remember that? Second example. Now, let's go to the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata itself says that every particular human situation that you can ever think of is covered in the Mahabharata. So let's think of one character whom we all will recognize. No, I'm not speaking about Arjuna, I'm speaking about Duryodhana. And do you recognize that how Duryodhana was able to influence his father throughout? And every time his father ever had a thought of doing some good for the sake of the Rajya, and I would also say Rashtra, because they were the power center for Bharat. Duryodhana, of course influenced by Shakuni Mama at the back, was able to change the decision of his father, or also at least influence him in a way that would offset the previous decision. And let's take one last example, once again with Duryodhana in it. And what we know as the friendship of Duryodhana and Karna. I'm not going to debate the friendship, but did you realize the fact that Karna felt forever indebted, forever, for his life, to Duryodhana, who at one point in time declared him Angaraj, the king of a small kingdom, and gave him the dignity at that point in time. Friends, it may not have occurred to you that all these four, Manthara, Shurpanaka, Duryodhana in the first case and Duryodhana in the second case, actually exploited the mind of the receiver. Yes. So what were those minds? They had carefully studied the patterns of the other side. For example, very, very well, Shurpanaka knew the mind of her brother Ravan. That what is it that will incite him into action? That's why the moment she saw that Ravan isn't getting angered enough by the fact that her nose and ears have been cut off and were bleeding supposedly by Lakshman, she quickly switched the topic and she told Ravan, you know what? The most beautiful woman in the world is there. And she should belong here. And that immediately stoked something in him. Okay, now what is that something? Let's take this instance. He belonged to the pattern which we call as Lubdha. The moment he saw what's in it for me, he switched into action. And then we know the rest is literally history. What ends he did? He went to get Sitama and then to defend his kingdom, just to keep her there. Right? First example. Second example. We know that Manthara had been along Kaikeyi's side for a long, long time. How well she would have known what drives Kaikeyi, and she knew that Kaikeyi belonged to the type that we called as Kruddha, driven by emotion. And so she was able to stoke the emotion of Kaikeyi by telling her that Bharat, her son, would lose all his value and his claim to the kingdom and probably all the attention he should receive. So she went from one end to the other, one who considered Ram as her own son, ended up sending him to Vanvas for 14 years. You got it? This is the second type. Let's come to the other two types. You may have figured that Dhritarashtra belonged to the type that we call as VIth. Yes, deep down, he always lived in fear. Why? This was stoked by the first loss which he felt very early when he was denied his so-called rightful claim to the throne by virtue of being physically not perfect. I don't want to call it physically disabled, but missing something. That fear stayed with him, so Bhita. And Duryodhana was able to tap that and leverage that throughout his life by keeping him in fear. And finally, let's come to Karna. Karna belonged to the Manina type. He was a proud warrior. And he was willing to go to any extent for it. So each time Duryodhana required Karna to act, Karna to behave in a certain way, all he had to do was to rouse the feelings around his pride. Got it? So these are the four examples. Now I'm going to tell you, as I promised, what techniques did they use? It wasn't accidental. There's a technique that is given for utilizing and tapping the emotion in each of those four patterns. But we won't be in a hurry. Let's go slowly. So, we just heard what are the instances in our Itihaas where you got to know how four people, and Very, very pointedly, I gave you examples where those 4 people using certain ways were able to exploit the mind of the other person. In the upcoming video, we will explain what those 4 behaviors, what those 4 approaches were, which corresponded to these 4 types. Look forward to it. If this is something that you like, you can continue to follow us and get all the previous videos on our Instagram handle and on our YouTube channel.